that this was a big decision, an amazing decision, one that we're very happy about. This morning, the Supreme Court has delivered a monumental victory for the Constitution, the separation of powers, and the rule of law in striking down the excessive use of nationwide injunctions to interfere with the normal functioning of the executive branch. The Supreme Court has stopped the presidency itself. That's what they've done. And really, it's been an amazing period of time this last hour. There are people elated all over the country. I've seen such happiness and spirit. Sometimes you don't see that, but this case is very important. I was elected on a historic mandate, but in recent months we've seen a handful of radical left judges effectively try to overrule the rightful powers of the president to stop the American people from getting the policies that they voted for in record numbers. It was a grave threat to democracy, frankly, and instead of merely ruling on the immediate cases before them, these judges have attempted to dictate the law for the entire nation. In practice, this meant that if any one of the nearly 700 federal judges disagreed with the policy of a duly elected president of the United States, he or she could block that policy from going into effect or at least delay it for many years, tie it up in the court system. This was a colossal abuse of power which never occurred in American history prior to recent decades. And we've been hit with more nationwide injunctions than were issued in the entire 20th century together. Think of it, more than the entire 20th century, me. I'm grateful to the Supreme Court for stepping in and solving this very, very big and complex problem, and they've made it very simple. I want to thank Justice Barrett, who wrote the opinion brilliantly, as well as Chief Justice Roberts, and Justices Alito, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Thomas. Great people. Thanks for this decision, and thanks to this decision, we can now promptly file to proceed with numerous policies that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis. And some of the cases we're talking about would be ending birthright citizenship, which now comes to the fore. That was meant for the babies of slaves. It wasn't meant for people trying to scam the system and come into the country on a vacation. This was, in fact, it was the same date, the exact same date, the end of the Civil War. It was meant for the babies of slaves, and it's so clean and so obvious. But this lets us go there and finally win that case, because hundreds of thousands of people are pouring into our country under birthright citizenship, and it wasn't meant for that reason. It was meant for the babies of slaves. So thanks to this decision, we can now promptly file to proceed with these numerous policies and those that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis, including birthright citizenship, ending sanctuary city funding, suspending refugee resettlement, freezing unnecessary funding, stopping federal taxpayers from paying for transgender surgeries, and numerous other priorities of the American people. We have so many of them. I have a whole list. I'm not going to bore you, and I'm going to have Pam get up and say a few words, but there's really, she can talk as long as she wants, because this is a very important decision.
Courageous Media, the winning continues. We have got massive breaking news out of the Supreme Court of the United States. SCOTUS has delivered a monumental win for the Trump administration. They have ended effectively all nationwide injunctions from lower level, inferior, black robe district court judges. No longer are any of these nationwide injunctions valid. As Trump said in that opening segment, they are immediately going to move to essentially unenjoin all of them, to debunk all of them, and pave the way for things like the end of birthright citizenship, which will most likely see another Supreme Court case on the merits, but paves the way for massive deportations, for massive defunding of sanctuary cities, for massive defunding of gender affirming mutilations for minors. This basically obliterates every single inferior district court judge nationwide injunction that has stopped the president's and the Trump administration from making good on their campaign promises. This is a massive, massive win. It's fantastic. We got some great news. We're going to check in on Fox News. But thanks everybody for rolling up. Really appreciate you being here. Check this out from Fox.
Interruption, but Shannon has some information for us. Let's go to you, Shannon Bream. You're there with that case?
Okay, yes. So this is at least a partial, if not a full, and we're reading this because there are several concurrences here, but it's written by Justice Barrett, which goes against the ruling that I just gave the guidance because she's one of the least junior justices, but she was assigned to write this opinion. And essentially what she says, some say that the universal injunctions give the judiciary a powerful tool to check the executive branch. But she says federal courts do not exercise general oversight of the executive branch. They resolve cases and controversies consistent with the authority Congress has given to them. When a court concludes the executive branch has acted unlawfully, the answer is not for the court to exceed its power, sounding very much like they are limiting these injunctions. We know here that they have granted at least partially the stay to these preliminary injunctions, but they say only to the extent that the injunctions are broader than necessary to provide complete relief to each plaintiff withstanding to sue. They say the lower courts have to move expeditiously with respect to each of these plaintiffs. It says the injunctions are also stayed to the extent that they prohibit executive agencies from developing and issuing public guidance about the executive plans to implement the executive order. If you remember, part of this executive order on birthright citizenship, the stay was that the agencies that would be responsible for actually implementing the change with birthright citizenship, those agencies couldn't even start making a plan. So that part of it is lifted as well. We do see that the dissent here comes from the three justices you expect. It looks like Justice Sotomayor filed the dissent. Kagan and Jackson joined that. Justice Jackson also filed a dissenting opinion, but there are a lot of concurrences here. Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, there are others. So we'll parse through this, but at its first blush, it looks like this is a win in putting a limit on these nationwide injunctions. We'll see how far those limits go as we dig back through this.
Got it.
Absolutely amazing. So basically what you hear in that ruling is no longer can they issue sweeping injunctive relief. If you've watched this channel, we've checked in with the right of self-defense and other attorneys that have said over and over and over again, in order for a district court to even have the legal authority to issue any kind of injunctive relief, you have to have a case in which there is severe harm to be done in the interim, and that harm cannot be undone by money. It cannot be made recompensed by money. And so all of these cases are essentially out. The only injunction that any of these lower level, inferior, black robe district court judges can do is injunctive relief for their specific plaintiffs. That's it. They can no longer enjoin the executive branch at a state, a district, or a nationwide level. They can only issue injunctive relief for their particular plaintiffs in their particular case. And of course, as you heard, the decision was 6-3. So it's not like it was even that close. This was not a 5-4. This was not a nail biter. This was a 6-3 decision right down the lines you would expect. And the fact that Roberts joined in on supporting the executive branch on this one says, because as you know, Roberts generally swings left, that this was more of a landslide than anything. The only three against it, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Sotomayor, and Kagan, the three you would expect. But this is absolutely massive. Massive news for the Trump administration, for the presidential agenda, for the agenda that the American people voted in a landslide to implement. This is absolutely great stuff. And as Trump said, so Trump tweeted about this even before he got on TV. Here we go. Great win in the United States Supreme Court. Even the birthright citizenship has been indirectly hit hard. Now, this is true. But of course, there will be most likely be another lawsuit, another case on the merits of birthright citizenship. And the Supreme Court will have to decide and make an interpretation of the amendment to determine if the clause under the jurisdiction thereof absolutely does limit birthright citizenship to those born in the United States to legally residing persons. In other words, you have to be a legal resident of the United States. You have to be here legally in order to have your child and have that child get birthright citizenship. If you are here illegally, you are very much like a diplomat of another nation. You are not under the jurisdiction of the United States. So just like if you were a foreign diplomat from country XYZ and you had your baby in the United States, your baby does not get birthright citizenship. It does not happen. And so the children born to illegal immigrants, people here illegally, or people here on a tourist visa should not get birthright citizenship. So it has been indirectly hit because the injunction has been lifted. So now the administration can make plans, the administration can issue proclamations, they can start denying birthright citizenship to people here illegally now. That will undoubtedly force another lawsuit, which will undoubtedly make its way through the courts. And we will probably see this case adjudicated on the merits at some later date. But in the meantime, we can stop this nonsense. This is absolutely amazing. Thanks so much for rolling up. Really appreciate everybody being here. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share Courageous Media with everybody that you know.